Really looking forward to this conversation today, and it's always a good time to talk about women's soccer, women's sports, but with the rise and acceleration of the growth, everything that's happening in the past year alone, really looking forward to the insights and highlights of that growth that's happened around women's soccer and women's sports this year. So really what we want to capture is the investment and growth in women's soccer and women's sports. Share and talk about the integration with stakeholders and rights holders and how the sport wins with that integration, and also acknowledge and recognize some of the challenges that come with the accelerated growth, and whether you call it a growing pain or a challenge or an opportunity, but just acknowledge those and talk about some of the things that stand out at this point for NWSL and some of the other women's sports properties here in the US and globally. So thanks for sharing this, and I'm really excited for the discussion with this panel, and I'll throw it to you all each to introduce yourself and talk about your roles with your organizations and some of the highlights just to kick us off before we get into the questions.
I start?
You start.
So my name is Tatjana Haenni. I'm the Chief Sporting Director for the NWSL. I'm originally from Switzerland. I moved here 2 years ago for this newly created position within the league, which confirms the growth and the opportunities we're having. And my background, in short, former player for Switzerland, coach, run a club, worked for FIFA 18 years, Swiss Federation, boutique agency, and now I'm here.
All right, we love that you're here. Welcome. Ruba, over to you.
Yeah, it's an honor to sit next to you. My name is Ruba Sbeah. I'm a senior director for brand, or senior director of brand at Major League Soccer. And so I've always worked in sports and entertainment, ESPN, Strava, Comedy Central. So always working at the intersection of culture and brand marketing. And so currently, like I said, I'm at Major League Soccer. So really, working to promote the league and our star players and just soccer overall. And it's been a great time.
David?
Great. Thank you, Ruba. So my name is David Griffiths. I work on the less glamorous side of the business on insurance and risk management. Based in London, work for Miller Insurance. We're the leading brokers in the football sector, and work with the Premier League, Women's Super League and Championship and Football Association over there. So my role is about advising clients on managing their risk. It's as exciting as that.
Everyone loves insurance. We'll dive deep into that. So Tatjana, let's start with you and talk about NWSL this year, the last 12 months alone, some real highlights when you think about attendance, when you think about media deal, when you think about a new stadium, facility investments that are happening. Talk about it from the league standpoint. What does the league see as the biggest wins for NWSL right now and the most important strategic priorities as you do think forward based on what you're seeing right now?
Yeah, so I'm super happy, of course, I'm privileged to be able to speak about that because everybody knows that we're just growing. It's amazing to see what has happened in the last couple of years. So I think this year, some of the huge successes we're having, we're in the first year of a 4-year media deal, which is public information, so I'm not saying any secrets, but the media, the public says 60 million a year worthwhile for 4 media partners, which is amazing, of course. Then we just reached, for the first time, overall ever 2 million attendance viewers in the stadiums, and we have still 2 weekends to go. So this coming weekend are the semifinals, and then we play the final in Kansas City, the stadium you mentioned, so purposely built just for the women's football team. Sorry, I still call it football. So I think overall amazing successes. In terms of the commercial partners, we have also been able to sign some new partners, but we're still working hard on that. I think that just takes a bit more time. So overall, it feels like we're at the starting point of an amazing future. We're expanding. We have already a 15 team known. It's going to be Boston. And we're in the process of finding out a 16th team to start in the league in 2026. So overall, just really positive. I think I could go on and on. On the player side, you know, we had, I think 20% of all the players who played in the Olympic football tournament played in the NWSL. We have some of the world's best players here, and we want to continue to have them. On the challenging side, I do think specifically scheduling is an issue for us. This country obviously is so big, so to make a scheduling in the parameters we're having is crucial, mostly because we also don't own the facilities. So we're second or third tenant in those stadiums. We always have to wait for MLS in many cases until you have your schedule, then we can do our schedule, and there's just some factors which make that a bit more complicated. And then I think just building on the momentum and making sure this league is commercially and sporting-wise going in the right direction and sustainable and financially profitable.
When you talk about some of those things, how do you view NWSL's role from a global perspective and being in that pole position and a leader in the growth of women's football? We'll say football.
Yeah, thanks for the question, because I think when I came, and that's maybe me personally given my history, because I live and breathe and I am women's football and that's my passion, and I really want to see it succeed and have, for the players mostly, the right environment. So when I came, and I think our commissioner Jessica Berman is amazing. She does a fantastic job. I really think she's so good for the league. And I told her, if this league can be a role model for the world, and that's maybe not our primary goal and focus right now, because it's firstly to be successful here in this country and be the best league in the world. That's our strategic objective. But really, the USA and the history of women's football in this country, and some of the former national team players, of course the 99ers, but then some others, Abby Wambach and Megan Rapinoe and Alex Morgans, they shaped the situation and the culture in the world for women's football globally. Those are the ones who pushed first. They fought for equal pay. They were so successful. They showed the world that actually women's football is a professional elite sport. So I think if we as a league can now take that role and do the same, we can actually influence women's football globally and show other leagues what's possible. Give, you know, a vision and a future for others to say, hey, if they can do it, we can do that too. So I really think it's a bigger picture here. If we achieve our goal to be the best league in the world, which I think we are already somehow, at least 1, 2, or 3, without being arrogant, I hope. We have some German friends here. I haven't seen anybody from England, but those are probably the ones we might need to discuss this. But I do think we, you know, the next level, like I don't know, even in this continent, Central America or South America or Europe, so many countries there, Asia, there's so much we can do, there's so much potential, and we really want to be that role model for them.
So Ruba, Tatjana talked a little bit about the brand partnerships and opportunity still ahead from a commercial standpoint. From your experience from a brand perspective, what is it that's attractive to brands right now, and the key trends that you're seeing with why brands want to connect in with women's sports right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's definitely a movement and not a moment, and I think brands are seeing that. And community, a sense of community and belonging is something that fans are really looking for, and that's an insight that we even see at MLS, where I think it's 85% of MLS fans they identify with community as their core driver behind their fandom, and so you're also seeing that on the NWSL side, and that is also you know, it's proven through the attendance records. And again, everything is going back to the community and sense of belonging piece. And so brands are wanting to tap into that, especially after this, you know, in this post-COVID world. And then another insight that brands are seeing and should see is that the women's sports fans, they transcend beyond just female audiences. And so there's that misconception where women's sports fans are just female, but they're young, they're Gen Z, millennial, they're diverse, and they're also male. There's male representation. And then when it comes to women's sports, there's higher engagement. So a brand will sponsor, let's just say a WNBA even, or an NWSL team, and then immediately you'll see brand engagement spike. You'll see an uptick in sales. Women's sports fans are driving, they have purchase power, and so it's something to really tap into. Another key insight is authenticity. And so, there's an authenticity factor when it comes to these female athletes. And so, if you're going to be a brand and you're going to be in this space, make sure that you're creating a platform that feels very authentic, where these athletes can tell their multidimensional stories and build meaningful programs. So, yeah, those are the top insights that we're seeing that brands should really be mining into.
So you mentioned, and you of course work for Major League Soccer. How does MLS fit into the role of supporting the growth of women's sports, women's soccer, NWSL, USL has a Super League that's launched this year. How does MLS see its role in supporting that growth in the women's space?
Yeah, I mean, what's the saying? High tides lift all boats, and so it's really a collective effort. Soccer just hasn't hit its ceiling yet, and I think with the Women's World Cup, with the World Cup coming up, then 28 Olympics, it's really just making sure that we're taking this sport seriously. We're focusing on the performance on the men's side, performance on the women's side. And also, I mean, what would be really cool is seeing the integration between the players. Again, just lifting brand perception and awareness on both the NWSL side and the men's side.
So talking about the athletes, let's go to insurance for a moment here. And in your work right now, more in England and in the UK with players, teams, and leagues in the UK, how are you seeing the trend as it relates to player protections and the athlete in the work that you're doing from an insurance service or product or even risk management perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. And I think what we've seen over the last 10, 15 years within the men's sport is there's been a lot of there's been huge developments in the support that they're being provided, and also the products that are being developed to look after them and protect their future careers. So it's the sort of less glamorous side of the business, but it's important. The players are the future, and looking after them from a young age, making sure that they're well advised. And have the right sort of support around them is key. And I think the women's side is definitely benefiting from what's been put there for the men in England, because quite often the women's Super League teams come alongside the Premier League side, so they're alongside, they run separately, and they've benefited from the developments in the professional advice. But I think the important thing is to actually see the distinct needs of the women compared to the men. And for example, what we're trying to do is to address some of the issues that are there. There's been a lot of high-profile injuries around the kind of ACLs, which there's a lot of research going into it at the moment, and seemingly a woman is 8 times more likely or something like that to get an ACL injury. And so what we're trying to do is address those issues in developing our products. So it's not necessarily about ending your career, it's about being a young player with a serious injury which needs surgery, and you may need some financial support to get there. So all we're trying to do is be creative in what we're doing, and put products out there that are going to support the women in the workplace.
Do you see as much of that as providing those products and services equal to the amount of education that still needs to happen?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. Clearly, education. I think the networks are strong on education in terms of professional advice, whether it's financial advice or insurance and risk management. Within the clubs, there's a huge amount of support, but the products have to be creative. They have to evolve with the changing environment to make sure they're suiting to the players of today.
So Tatjana, let's come back over to, you mentioned earlier NWSL, and one of the challenges being the calendar and NWSL now opposite the FIFA calendar. Can you talk about that a little bit in terms of how big of a priority in consideration is that for NWSL to look at changing its schedule and what benefits might come with that?
Thanks for an easy question.
Take it from here.
Well, the MLS is looking at flipping their calendar.
It's our fault, huh?
Well, the calendar is a huge challenge for us, honestly. It is, and it's not necessarily do we play a summer season or winter season, it's just the FIFA dates are a mess for us. I think globally, all the big leagues would confirm that. There's now a new calendar, 26 to 29, which FIFA claims that this is better and they took so many things in account. We actually disagree with that. And one of our biggest challenges, we were not heard. We had no influence. This is a political discussion on a top level where we feel like the ones who are actually dealing with those players and injuries is a key topic to that when you talk about calendar, number of games, number of rest days, length of the season, the national domestic leagues with the international teams, with the new club competitions, which is all great. We all want high-level new competition, but it has to be in a balance, and it's not right now. So generally speaking, the calendar is an issue, and then as I mentioned earlier, scheduling for us is super difficult, so sometimes we cannot do what everybody would think. You know, what do they think? Well, we have no option. We actually, I think we know what we're doing. I would hope we know what we're doing, but sometimes we're just limited because of other external factors. So your main question about flipping the calendar, we're actually talking about that constantly. It's always a question, but it's really difficult. We have to balance players' health and safety and their performance with you know, some domestic factors, which are just key, size of the country, weather conditions. Do we have the facilities? Would we play in winter? And we have some winter markets here. You know, do they have the possibility to have indoor training facilities for 2-3 months? So even though it might be an option actually for some reasons, would we be able to do it for other reasons? So it's just not that easy. And right now we actually also see some advantages. We think, as an example, that the performance of the US women's national team, they have a slight advantage because we're in the middle of the season when the big summer tournaments are happening, the FIFA Women's World Cups and the Olympics, whereas the other teams, and I think Spain was a good example this summer, they were just tired. I mean, they were, I want to say a word which I shouldn't say, I know, but they were just tired, they were exhausted. They had a long season, a Champions League, and I don't think Spain performed at their best level at the Olympics, whereas the US women's national team was kind of the middle of the season and better, maybe potentially in a better conditional performance-wise. So there's pros and cons, but we're talking about it and it stays a topic. For the moment we play a summer season, and the bigger challenges we have right now actually is the Men's Club World Cup and the Men's World Cup, which again takes stadiums away, facilities away, training sites away, which we actually don't even know. Some of our teams, they play in stadiums which will be used in the Men's World Cup and they're gone for like 5, 6, 7 weeks, depending the timing. So we have those issues we want to fix first before we really go into more details. But it's a constant topic. For right now, we're a summer season.
Do you see, so MLS is having this conversation, it's really centered around pinning it to any decision maybe to the World Cup, the Men's World Cup in 2026. Do you see a moment in time where it would make sense if NWSL were to ever change the calendar?
You know, I'm biased, of course. I have been all my life in Europe until 2 years ago. So for me, a summer season. I think our season is too short, to be honest. We play like 8 months. We have players who are the best players in the world, and they're on the contract for 12 months. And I think we want to grow the game. We want a more fan engagement. We want a more regularity. We want to build up community work. And if you just stop for 3 months if you're not making the playoffs, your season finishes in the first weekend of November, and the season starts again mid-March. So there's so much time you could actually do something meaningful. I personally would say yes, we should flip, but of course this is not the only argument. There's so much more behind, and I honestly also have to say right now we're better off the way we play, and the rest we will see.
So one more question for you, and I want to then tie it into the brand piece of this too. It's around the youth to pro pyramid and an integration with a multi-layered system, development system, which is common around the world, something NWSL hasn't yet developed. How are you thinking about that right now?
Another good question, but actually something comes to my mind regarding the calendar. I want to add that. There's a potential FIFA Women's Club World Cup coming, which apparently has been approved. Not that we would know anything about it, just saying, but we read media, so we follow. We read that it's coming. We read that it should be January, February 26. We know that we have a CONCACAF Women's Championship, which is actually great. We're in the first season. There is a final tournament next summer. So I don't know if that's the qualification for that FIFA Women's Club World Cup, but if that's in January, February, we have to make sure we're prepared. These players have to be ready for that tournament. So it would be good to know, if anybody from FIFA is here, it would be good to know if that's happening.
Raise your hand, FIFA.
And if so, we can actually make a plan so we're ready for that tournament, because obviously we would like to win it. So anyway, to your youth question, yes, another key topic for us. The global game has changed so much. Europe has done an amazing job. Some countries, certainly Spain, England, France, Germany, they're doing an amazing job in their academies, in their youth system. UEFA hosts yearly under-17, under-19 competitions. Now they have an under-23. It's just they are constantly playing on the highest level, and we lack that here. And I think, again, as a Swiss person, I think I'm allowed to say that. I don't think that the college system is good enough for us now. The player development in that system has been amazing, and certainly the reason why this country was so good in women's football. But with the global development and what's necessary for a young player, and you can maybe look at the MLS, what they do on their side, on the boys' side. If you want to be the best possible player and competitive on a competitive level with the world, you need a different system. And we're looking into that. But then again, what's the NWSL role? There's US soccer, there's others, there's other leagues, there's other clubs, other systems. This country has so many leagues and systems that I don't think I have an overview by now. We are the NWSL, we're the top elite club division with USL together in this country. What is our role on the youth side? How much money do you invest? What do you get? What are others doing? So we really have to be smart about that. But clearly the future for better players and to be the best league in the world is going through youth. And we have plans. We're discussing them right now. We want to start with something next year, but I can't really say much more because it's still within, not approved by our board. So fingers crossed. If you hear something from us next season, they approved it. If you don't hear something, then they didn't approve it.
Mark your calendars. So Ruba, taking that into mind from a brand perspective as it relates to brands investing in athletes too, there's obviously the athlete on the field, but there's more brand development of the human from an off-the-field perspective. What's bringing the brands to the athletes directly? What are you seeing from that perspective?
Yeah, so female athletes tend to they're inherently more comfortable being more vulnerable and showing layers of themselves. And I think, until we have this youth system in place, which is needed, at least as marketers, what we can do is just tell the athlete stories, give them a platform to then be able to show that youth, just the representation on the field. And so it's, brands have a role in being able to provide that representation. But again, female athletes inherently are more comfortable, just showing more layers of themselves. But then also there is a great deal of responsibility on, media platforms and brands to be able to also focus on the performance of these athletes. I think I hear a lot of athletes talk about that, about how they're not just the person off the field. They want to be known for their talents on the field first and foremost. But I do also think you need both. So, for example, Netflix and Under Pressure, that docuseries, how incredible! Even just the title in itself, the trailer, it takes the sport very seriously. And it starts, and they dimensionalize the athletes because they are multidimensional. They just are, they have so much personality to themselves, but they're also, they're high competitors first. And it's great to be able to show their journey of grit, and to be able to qualify for, a national team or whatever that is, but just to show the process. And so when it comes to brands, they're attracted to the multidimensionalism of these athletes, the authenticity of them. But then also on the brand side, they just, again, have that responsibility to make sure that they're representing these athletes, talent on the field and off the field.
So can we go a little bit deeper into that from the perspective of social media and how that plays a role in how the athlete is telling their own story from a social media perspective, versus what a brand might start to tell, and how, as younger athletes might be coming into the light, whether it be from a professional club level or a national team perspective, what are brands looking at from an athlete's social media perspective, but also from the athlete side? How should they be thinking about their presentation on social media?
Yeah, there's so much to start. That's why it's so important for sponsors, for these brands that are coming in, they want to work with these athletes. I keep throwing out authenticity, you hear that a lot, but truly there needs to be purpose. You can't just slap a logo on an athlete's story presented by, and then that's it. You have to meet the athlete where they are, and then on top of that, women's sports fans, they see right through bullshit. So if you're not there for that athlete to amplify their voice and their story, then fans are going to see that, and that's what's so great about just women's sports fans and the way that they fan. It's niche, but it's the passion and helps drive that engagement. But brands, what they want is the personality. Again, there's just these athletes, they're moms. They carry babies and they come back and then they compete at the highest level. That's something that's relatable, and a lot of brands, depending on their marketing strategy and their business strategy, they want to tap into that person because they're trying to get a specific audience. So if there is that resonance there, that relatability there authentically, then that sponsor shouldn't want to try to change that person's storytelling and the way that they want to tell it to fit any other agenda. I'm curious on if it's a trend, will be a trend or not. Brands historically have gone maybe through a team or a league as a primary partnership and then maybe brought in an athlete endorsement agreement as part of that deal. Do you see that being more of the trend still, or would you see brands potentially considering going directly to athletes as more of a primary path into relationship with the athlete? Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say what's going to take precedent, and because I think that you'll have a balance of both. Like WNBA and Glossier, that beauty brand that became the beauty brand for the league, and they're seeing positive impact because of the fact that they're choosing these specific athletes, putting them on national campaigns. So I think you still need that. I don't know where the trend is heading either way. I think both are going to happen. And then when you take a look at individual athletes, they end up being almost, I hate saying it, but like influencers, or talent, or however you want to position it. So I think that you need you need both. There's value in both approaches.
Yeah. So David, over to insurance, our favorite topic. We talked about tailoring policy services towards the athlete. When you think about the leagues and teams right now and the growth that has happened in the women's space, bigger investment, bigger risk, bigger responsibility, bigger obligation, younger players coming into the leagues. How are you approaching into teams and leagues from an insurance perspective to ensure, whether it's an insurance perspective, a risk management perspective, or just really contributing to this growth in a way that keeps and maintains a healthy environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think the safeguarding issue is really important in the game, and Ruba's talking about the athletes there, and they're it's important. Mental health is a big issue now, and I suppose what we're doing really is just advising the clubs on their ability to make themselves sustainable going forward, because at the end of the day, their businesses, to be sustainable, they've got to have the right frameworks in place to look after their staff, players, being a key part of that clearly, and make sure that the right structures are in place to maintain those risks. And insurance will play a small part in that in terms of mitigating the risks, but it's really about taking the right structures within the organisation and learning from previous situations. And I think there is clearly in the English environment there's been a lot that can be learned from the Premier League side and the Premier League clubs and what they've done, and also historical issues. The sport has seen a lot of issues with abuse and the results of that have been huge developments in terms of protections around individuals, and insurance plays a role in that, because obviously insurers are really keen to make sure that those protections are in place if they're going to be protecting the businesses from litigation, etc. So the reality is that they will insist that the right frameworks are in place. So our job is about advising the different stakeholders, whether it's the clubs, the league, the football association, on those risks and how they bring best practice to support that.
Does the landscape change with younger players coming into the environments, the club environments and league environments?
Yes, of course, and the players are getting younger, getting contracts at young ages. It does change, but the principles can be taken from other sports. I think it's important, obviously, to recognise the nature of the young ladies compared to young men, and what different risks that brings, to make sure that the environment's right for them.
How much creativity or adaptability do you have in your work when it comes to whether it's with the athlete and what's provided, or to the teams and leagues? Is there the ability to get creative in structures that are provided?
I think what's important, I think, is that clubs and organisations never stand still on risk. It's an evolving environment the whole time, and so what we're preaching is don't put a framework in place, leave it for 5 years and come back and look at it again. You've got to be reviewing it. It might seem mundane, but twice a year, 3 or 4 times a year, you have to be looking at your risk register and actually reviewing how you're mitigating those risks, and what are new risks that are coming on board that you've got to consider. Because if you stand still, something's going to kind of jump out and destroy the business plan. So that's a big part of it. So whether it's creativity or just being more methodical about your approach to risk, I think it eventually ends up with the same thing.
So Ruba, back to you. I want to lean into World Cup 2026 and Club World Cup coming to the US, and this runway that this sport has in North America over the next several years. From a brand perspective, how does women's football and women's sports take advantage of these men's tournaments coming to the United States?
Yeah, I think when it's all about the cultural conversation. So I think that's what women's sports is doing really well, is they are dominating social, cultural conversation. And so they're becoming these leading influencers, if you will, in across across different categories. So fashion, music, and so there is that integration that you can also have when it comes to the men's side. So yes, World Cup is coming, but there's World Cup in soccer, football, at the intersection of fashion and beauty and music, et cetera, that they can then enter themselves into the conversation. And so that's probably where my head goes first is and how can they take themselves, be true to their values and what they represent, and then insert themselves into the conversation beyond just, yes, sport, but sport adjacent to all these other cultural touch points that they have a right to enter in.
So Tatjana, to you on that similarly, NWSL has always had its rise with Women's World Cup tournaments from an attendance, from a revenue standpoint. This time we're talking about a Men's World Cup, but the United States or North America is host country. How can NWSL take advantage of the interest and engagement that will be on U.S. soil over the next 2 years?
I mean, that's a really difficult question. I think I agree with you what you've said about the cultural and the social change. And of course, you're the brand expert, which I'm not. I'm more the sporting expert. But I see exactly the same thing as you said on the sporting side. So I don't necessarily think there's a direct link to the NWSL specifically, because we're a sporting commercial entity who runs a league, which is rather small, given the size of the country with 14 or soon 16 teams or clubs. But really what it does, it hopefully brings soccer as the #1 sport to this continent. And I also think from being here now 2 years that the youth system is broken. It's too expensive, which it's nowhere in the world. It's a business, which it should not be for kids who want to be outside and play football. It doesn't open the doors for every community and every area in some parts of the country because it's an expensive sport. So I would hope that these things, which not necessarily directly have anything to do with my job at the league, but that the Men's World Cup and the Club World Cup and the Olympics over the next 3-4 years open doors for anybody in this country to play soccer at the grassroots level and to have fun. And then you get also better players if the youth system is there. And then what we do lack, what we see now in our league, we have a lack of expertise when it comes to staff. So having the best players is one thing. We can do transfers. We can bring the best players to the country. That's easy. We can try to develop better American domestic players. But really what we realize now, we have a lack of staff. We have not enough highly qualified coaches, assistant coaches. There is a goalkeeper coach education program, I think since a year in this country. I mean, how can you coach the world's best goalkeeper, which you have now with Ann-Katrin Berger and the US women's national team goalkeepers, and you have no goalkeeper coach in your team? So anyway, I'm going into details, but we need more staff, high performance, medical, mental health, you raised it, huge issue. So these teams now in our league, they have a staff of 20 people, and we don't find them. So I hope making soccer sport #1 in the country, not just economy-wise, but just social participation, fandom, helps everybody who is actually involved in sports and any culture, the whole society.
Yeah. So we just have a moment left. Yeah, that deserves a round of applause. Just 2 to 3 things you're most excited about for the next 12 months in our final moment here.
I think it's about making the women's football sustainable, and I think the growth is really exciting. Yeah, the money that's coming in, for me, it's about using that money wisely for the long term. Yeah, make it a sustainable sport.
Ruba?
continuing to take these star athletes who are finally getting the recognition that they deserve, and because they are incredible athletes on the field, but then they have these awesome stories and personalities. So it's having brands invest in them to, then grow their awareness. And then hopefully media equity and broadcast equity when it comes to distribution of the on-the-field play and also the off-the-field content.
Tatjana, bring us home.
Yeah, that's an easy one, that the NWSL is the best league in the world and we win any possible competition.
Boom. Woo! There you go. Thank you all. Thank you to each of you, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank